Hello everyone, it's Marc Sabatella from Mastering MuseScore, and welcome to the MuseScore Café. Hopefully, everyone who's here successfully figured out the time zone thing, and yeah, time's complicated, right? Music's complicated, but I'm here to try to make things as simple as I can, at least for the music part, right? Time is still time, and not much we can do about that. So, thanks everyone being here, and what we're going to be talking about is actually the theme music for the Music Masterclass. And actually, let me flip over my whatchamacallit thingy here and float this comment window so that I can be still viewing comments while we do other things. There we go. So what we're going to actually be doing is looking at the theme music from the Music Masterclass, which is a string quartet piece. You've mostly heard this before. And we're going to look at what's involved in entering that music. And so certainly if anyone has given a shot, Rod, I saw you posted a version. We're going to take a look at that version and, see if there's any, suggestions I can give you about that. Yeah, if anyone tried it or if you've looked at it and say, how would I do the blah, 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 just ask me about that. Other than that, I'm just going to start jumping around and doing some things. So let me first go ahead and open Rod's version of this piece. Whoops, what have I done? Save. No, I didn't mean to save that. I meant to open a file. Let's try that now. Open a file. There it is. So this is Rod's version, and boy, it sure looks awfully familiar, right? We feel like we've seen this before, hopefully. I'm going to go ahead and just hit the play button on it because, certainly if anything is drastically wrong, that's going to let me know. Yeah, this sounds pretty familiar, right? All right, so nice job entering that music, Rod. If you are, here, feel free to be dropping in with any questions. But I know it's like 4 a.m. or 3 a.m. or whatever the heck time it is after the the time difference here. So the only thing that I'm like looking at it and listening to it, and the only thing I noticed immediately being possibly off a little bit is there's a thing that I did with the articulations at the end here, these accent markings here at the end, that I had played with a couple different versions of that. So depending on which version you worked from, I should actually check and see how I posted it, right? Let me do that. So for anyone who hasn't already done this, let's go ahead and check it out. It's under the notation projects here for people, you've got to be enrolled in the course to have access to it. So this is the version that Rod had. My version that I said to start with is this version here. And yeah, okay, so I did something here specifically of putting both an accent and a staccato marking on these two notes in measure 26, 27, 28, 29. So I heard the difference. And the thing is, when I originally did this, I used the hat, the marcato accent. The marcato accent in previous versions of MuseScore used to play accented and short, which is the usual jazz interpretation of a marcato. But unfortunately, as with many things in music, there are multiple interpretations of things. The usual jazz interpretation of marcato is accented and short. The usual classical interpretation of marcato is just more accented. It's a louder accent, but not shorter. But that's not the sound I wanted. I wanted the louder and shorter. So I had used Marcato originally when I wrote this piece because I was relying on MuseScore 3's playback. MuseScore 4 is playing it back more classically. This jazz classical distinction isn't like black and white or anything, but on average, jazz people tend to interpret Marcato as short. Classical people tend to interpret it as not. So in any case, I decided I would redo that measure so that it would have it would be really explicit. It is both accented and short. So the only thing that I noticed really offhand here is that these notes right here need to have the Marcato on it. So so no volume on the iPad. That's interesting. It does supposedly work. I don't know if you've used it before, but I haven't tried it. It supposedly works to do live streams on iPhone, iPad, and also on Android. That didn't work until fairly recently. So let's talk about how to add those staccato markings, right? We've already got the accents here. What I'm going to do is I've clicked this measure, and I'm going to shift click this measure down here. And that way I have selected that measure across all three staves. And now what I want to do is add an accent. So I can, not an add, there already is an accent. I want to add a staccato dot. So I can either click the staccato dot on the toolbar or use the shortcut Shift S. I'm going to try the toolbar. I never use the toolbar. Boom. All right, so that did the job. So there's something I want to tell you about these combined accents since it came up here. Is this one symbol or is it two symbols? Take a look at that. It is actually a single symbol. If I drag the accent, the staccato dot moves with it. This is a thing that MuseScore does that it does in some situations and doesn't necessarily always. But if there are two articulation marks on a single note, depending on how you added it and what version of MuseScore you're using and what order you add them in and all these different variables, it may combine them into a single combined articulation, which is kind of nice because then the spacing between these can be a little nicer than if it was trying to place them separately. If you hadn't had that, like I'm going to delete, what did I just delete? I probably just deleted one of my palettes. Oh well. If I delete that marking and then come over to the palettes, open up the articulations palette, you'll see there is a combined accent staccato there. So you can just add it directly as well if you knew in advance that that's what you're going to want. But if I'm going to this time use shortcuts. Shift S to add the staccato and then Shift V to add the sforzato accent. And you'll see it did, in fact, combine them. And so let's just listen to the difference here. I'm going to undo all those changes, and let's just listen to that passage. Da, right? Da, da, da. I'm trying to sing up in that octave, but I'm obviously still an octave short. Da, da, da. It was playing them on the long side. Let me play it one more time. Which is fine, but it's not what I intended. I intended them to be more separation there. So this time, if I don't know what's actually going to happen here. Let's find out if I actually pick the accent staccato above. I have a feeling it's just going to add that as well as an accent. It's not going to get rid of the accent. It's probably not that smart. Let's find out. Ha, it is not that smart. So instead, I'll use Shift S just to add the staccato. And this time, I will play it, and you'll hear the separation that I was going for. There you go, accented and shorter, which, Marcato could mean that if you're writing for jazz or funk players. All right, so other than that, though, nothing else jumped out as being off here. So, Rod, I think you did everything marvelously. The one thing I don't remember is, like, I see the slurs, and I remember that I had put in slur markings here for the cello, and I know I didn't add many other slurs. Because this is a point of some contention. If there's any string players out here, I will gladly accept your input on this, but I also know it's very subjective. Some people who teach arranging and orchestration will tell you not to put in bow markings. Like, don't put in slurs in, like, okay, first of all, slurs for stringed instruments are used to indicate that you're playing a bunch of notes in one bow direction. Da 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 dum, ba da 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 dum, da 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 dum, like that, or ba da 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 dum, da 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 dum, da 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 dum. Okay, Marla, yes, but you have too many strings, as do I, right? So someone who plays four-stringed instruments with a bow, let's be a little more narrow about this. So I don't have a good feel for like. Is that too long? Well, we'd be better off going ba do da 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 dum, like basically changing bow every beat. I feel like for this piece, my sense is that rapid bowing would be too much, but I just don't have a good feel for it. So, and this is true of most people who aren't string players. We might write for strings, we might have some sense of writing for strings, but those details of bow changes, it's one of those things where if you don't really play the instrument, yeah, your opinion on that matter will be suspect. String players will look at it and go, yeah, I don't like those bowings, and do their own. So normally we use slurs to indicate that. So if I wanted to say I want this all done on one bow, I would select that and then select that and slow it and select this. So do da 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 ba da 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 do da 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 da, right? Changing bow every measure. So yeah, the string players are generally going to want to figure this out on their own. Is the standard advice that many orchestration teachers will tell you. They will tell you that if you don't definitely know what you're doing and have a very specific idea in mind, string players in general are going to be more than happy to figure out their own bowings. In an orchestra situation, if you're writing for orchestra, the deal is you don't want to leave it to every player individually, but the concertmaster or the first violinist, someone who's put in charge of that will go through and mark up where the bowing should go so that everyone in the orchestra is using the same bowing, at least everyone playing the first violin part. So often the standard advice is don't put in slur markings unless you absolutely positively know what you're doing. So yeah, as you said, Dale, Mark. So yeah, aka Mark, are you really, do you go by Mark with a C? I've always wondered that because you have that in your nickname there. So yeah, in a large ensemble, it's very common for those bowings to be worked out by the first chair violin. In a string quartet, we're typically not so in sync with the parts. Like this part, you can see it's very contrapuntal, right? So, all right, great. I will refer to you as Mark now. So yeah, and the thing is, yeah, and so it's complicated. If you don't put anything, then the character of the piece can change. So this is an open question that I err on the side of not putting in the bow markings because it feels like the safer choice. But if there's a specific place where I know I want a specific effect, I will write that in and then trust that a violin player seeing it will go, oh, well, he didn't write in most bowing, so he's leaving that up to me. But he wrote that one in. He probably wants that one. That's what I tend to do. So in any case, that is why we're seeing very little in the way of bowings here. Right now, MuseScore playing it back isn't going to, you're not going to hear the difference between whether those slur markings are there or not. Ultimately, I would expect there to be a little more sophistication there so that the bow changes will be more audible, the difference between bowing every note and versus changing bows once a measure. So in any case, that's some stuff about bowing that I wasn't necessarily planning to get into, but I think it's a good discussion to have and a good thing to be thinking about that whole issue. So the only bowings I wrote in were for these couple little 16th notes, and to be honest, those I probably could have gotten away with not having there either. People would have figured that out. Just like for a pianist, I'm sort of insulted if someone, not insulted really, but if someone else writes in a fingering for me, I'm like, yeah, right, I'm not 7 years old, right? I'm going to figure out my own fingerings. That's also very dismissive. So no, fingerings are useful, but pianists are going to want to figure out their own fingerings. This is an interesting little exercise that you can do. I'm holding up my hand here, and I'm holding it up in such a way that I'm trying to get my arm as vertical as possible, and I want everyone to do this and look at your own hand and compare it to mine. Middle finger is the longest. Most people, middle finger is the longest. That's almost a given. But after that, it changes, right? My ring finger here, the one with the ring on it, that's the second tallest finger. Then the index finger, and then the pinky. But the difference between all of them is pretty small. Your hand might look different. There's a general bias that I've understood is sort of a gender bias, where in general, biological females will have longer index fingers compared to their fourth fingers, but it's, there's always variation. Also, pinkies, some people's pinkies are much shorter than the other fingers. Mine happens to be almost as long as the others. So the shape of your hand affects a lot of things about what is actually playable and what the best finger to play it would be. Doesn't really relate to the bowing thing, but what the heck, we're here to just learn stuff, so I'm going to show you stuff. Anyhow, let's now get into actually entering some of this music. If questions come up, then feel free to ask. So I have the PDF of that sitting here, and then what I can do is do this thing where I can float that window, and I think I can't float it and the chat. Oh yes, Chris, this is a great observation. That's why I said, I'm not 7 years old. I was being snarky. But yeah, it's absolutely, when you're writing for young musicians, you want to include information that maybe professionals don't need. And there's nothing wrong with that, right? Absolutely nothing wrong with that. So yeah, maybe it's not the same bowing slurs versus fingering. There's a similarity there in which sometimes it's okay, sometimes it makes sense to put it in there, and sometimes it doesn't. But yeah, no, it's not an identical situation. I will absolutely grant that. All right, so let's go ahead and start entering this music. I'm going to create a new score with Control-N. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to say create from template. So at the top here, you have the option of choosing instruments or creating from a template. Your sixth finger is short. All right, so I do have to tell this story because it's a great story. I had this student who was a guitar player. I don't play the guitar, but I know theory and I can teach chords and things like that. And he was able to adapt for guitar. I had this student, and we had been working together for several months. And at one point, I was talking about some chord voicing, and I was saying, okay, so this chord voicing should have this note, this note, this note, and this note in it, and then, we're going to try to figure out how to do this on the guitar. And he struggles with it for like 10 seconds and says, this is where that extra finger would have come in handy. And I started to laugh, and then I looked at his hand, and I kid you not, this guy only had 4 fingers, and I had just been teaching him for like months and not realized this. On his fretting hand, he only had 4 fingers because he was born without a thumb, and they had removed his pinky early on and moved it to where his thumb goes because they figured thumbs are more useful than pinkies, but they didn't know he was eventually going to become a guitar player, where that's in fact not true. So in any case, that's that silly little story there. You can create from either by choosing instruments and go over here and say strings, bowed, and actually add 2 violins and a viola and a cello, but string quartet is a ready-made template. So create from template, chamber music, string quartet. I'll go ahead and hit next. And now let's take a look at the PDF. I have to make a choice between viewing the music or viewing the chat as far as which one I can pin. So right now I'm going to keep the chat. I'm going to let the chat go away while I pin the music here. So we can see the music is in 2/4 and no key signature. So I'll pick the time signature of 2/4. And I said, yeah, no key signature is what I meant to say. And I don't know how many measures, and I don't care how many measures. I'll deal with that later. There's no pickup, so that's all good. you can get your title and information in here first. If you're using this wizard here, you may have noticed that you can't tab from field to field, and this is sort of a part of the whole accessibility business that's going on in MuseScore 4 of improving how accessibility works in terms of getting around the interface. And overall, there are improvements, but there's some dialogues like this one where it does feel like tabs should be the way to do it. But in any case, it's not. It's down arrow, just so you know. And there's good sound reasons for it, but there's also good sound reasons why it may eventually change. So up and down arrow move through this thing. So my name, Marc Sabatella, subtitle. Oops, see, I just did the tab thing again. I'm so, I still have muscle memory going on that. Music, master, class, theme, music, no lyricist. I'll skip the copyright for now. Actually, because it always comes up, copyright, and then I know that I can get to the copyright symbol if I go to a browser window and in somewhere or other I type following special command. It's going to be Control-Shift-U, A9. That gives me a copyright symbol that I can copy and paste. Mac has its own shortcut for it. Windows has its own shortcut, but that's how it works on Chrome. So now I can paste that sucker into my copyright field. Copyright, whenever I wrote that thing, it probably says on the music. Does it? Yeah. Did I not put a copyright message on the music? Or did, oh, this is, yeah, I don't have it on the PDF. So I'm just going to pretend I wrote it in 2021 because I probably did, unless it was 2020. And then there we go. So I've got my score set up, and let me flip back over to the chat really quick and see what I've missed. All right. So, okay, a word for the extra finger. All right. So what I'm going to do now is talk about this process of entering these first few notes, because the first few notes, anytime I do one of these demonstrations, what happened to my PDF? Oh, there's my PDF. Often set the tenor for how I'm going to do this. You can see that it starts off with everyone having essentially the same rhythm, but different pitches. That's going to be really common in small ensemble music. In fact, this is a little unusual in that it's so contrapuntal. Small ensemble music is, I won't say seldom that contrapuntal, but the way it starts here with everyone having the same rhythm but different pitches is really common. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to optimize for this. All right. So I'm going to optimize for this. I missed setting the tempo. Oh, you're right, but I can add that later. So thank you. I'm going to click this, and then Shift-Alt-T is the shortcut to add a tempo, and then 112. And if you don't want to remember the shortcut, you can always go to the Add menu here, Add Text, Tempo, somewhere down here is Tempo. Where's Tempo? I never use the menu to add tempo. Oh, it's way down there at the bottom. Look at that. I never use the menu to add tempo. So I use the plus menu here. You can also use Add Text, Tempo from the main menu, or you can use the palettes. There's a tempo palette, and you can just click and add a tempo. So I've got that. So I'm going to enter these notes, and what I'm going to do is because I know I'm going to want the same pitches for all the staves here, I'm going to skip the grace note, because if you notice, violin 1 has that grace note, but no one else does. No one else has that grace note. And so if I put it in first and then I copy and paste it to the other staves, I'm going to have grace notes that I just got to delete. So I'm going to think ahead. And this is something I will say I do often when writing ensemble music like this. Try to think ahead to save myself a little work. Meanwhile, let me move this chat over here so when I open it up, when I open it up, I can see it quickly. There we go. So, okay. So I'm going to go ahead and come over to this first measure, go to note input mode with N, and this is a thing that you can now do in MuseScore 4, and it's another one of those things, frankly, that was a change made as an improvement, and it does improve some things, but it makes some things a little more awkward. But here, it's going to be an improvement. I can actually add a whole series of accented quarter notes really easily. I can select the accent mark on the toolbar, and now that's going to ride. As I enter notes, they're all going to get that accent. So I can enter 5 for the quarter note, and type B, 0, C, 0, C sharp. Okay, and then so for the C sharp, I am going to use the shortcut plus to tell it sharp, and you'll see sharp is highlighted on the toolbar. And then C sharp, 0 for the rest, D, 0, and then plus D, 0, and then it's an E, and then a low E. No, it's a G sharp, sorry. E, space, and then I'll type plus G, and of course this is the wrong octave, so I'll use Control down, Command down on Mac to change the octave there. And then finally the rest, and then the A. Does the A have an accent too? Yes, it does. So now I have the pitches for that first section in there. Now realistically, that was easy enough that, this whole trick that I'm going to show you of, entering a line for one instrument and then just fixing the pitches, it's not going to save me any trouble in this example, because this is a simple example. But with more complicated rhythms, you're going to find this real useful. So I'm going to skip the grace note, as I mentioned, but I am going to put in the dynamic because everyone has that same dynamic. So I'll put in my forte. All right. Now what I'm going to do is select that passage, and I'm going to shift click down to the bottom staff. So I have that passage selected across all staves. All right. Now I'm going to use Tools, Explode. You may know the Explode tool as a way of taking a chord and splitting its notes among the staves below, but it can also, if it's a single note line, just copy it to the staves below. So boom, now I have that same passage for all the instruments. And of course I'm going to have to change the pitches, but the rhythm is already there, the articulation's already there, and the dynamics are already there. The rhythm in this case was so easy, again, it really didn't save us anything, but for other scores, it absolutely would. All right, so what I'm going to do now is show you how to fix the pitches. So to fix the pitches, what I'm going to do here is go back to note input mode, but this time instead of regular note input mode, see this little arrow? There's the note input icon. There's a little arrow next to it, and you can also get there somehow by the tab order. Actually, that's something. Now that I think about it, I want to know how to get there by keyboard shortcut alone. So there is a shortcut just to go to repitch mode. That's what we're going to use as repitch mode. But I'm going to use Shift Tab, Shift Tab, Shift Tab, Shift Tab, Shift Tab. I'm kind of fumbling around here to see space bar while on the note input icon does the job. I want to get down here to where it says repitch existing notes, and there's a shortcut, Control Shift I for some reason. So when I select that, I am now in repitch mode. It's a special form of note input mode that works differently than the other forms. The normal form of note input, you select a duration, you enter pitches. Select a duration, enter pitches. In repitch mode, you don't select durations. You just enter pitches, and it replaces the pitches that are there while preserving the rhythm. So check this out. I want E, E. Ooh, except it's down an octave. So let me drop that down. Oh, crap, look at that. That is a known crash. That one. So, by the way, last time I was fighting a crash issue, and it turned out to be that my score was, produced during an experimental early build and had a corruption in it. This crash is one where it's known immediately after an undo, changing pitch of a note will crash on some systems. Some people's systems it crashes reliably, other systems it does not. So what I want to do is somehow get back that score, right? So let's deal with this. I just had a crash. I don't like crashes. No one likes crashes. So MuseScore did autosave my work. I have this bad habit when I'm doing these demonstrations of not saving my work. In real life, I don't have that habit. In real life, when I'm not doing demonstrations, I'm much more conscious about saving my work. But I wasn't conscious of it here. So if I try to, MuseScore did make an autosave file of that. And what I want to do is try to recover that autosave, because if you've saved your work, if you actually save it to a file and then you work for an hour and don't save and then you crash, MuseScore will detect that the next time you go to open that score. Say, hey, here's an autosave version of that crash. You want to restore it. That's all great if you ever saved it. But I never saved this one. And so MuseScore saved the autosave for me, but it's not going to be very good about asking if I want to recover it. I'm going to have to find it myself. So I'm going to find it myself and see if I can get back to it. All right. So the process of doing this differs from operating system to operating system. And I'm on Linux, and so almost none of you are also on Linux. So none of you are going to find this particular process to be exactly the way it's going to be for you. But you'll notice that there was this this local share business on Windows. That's probably app data. On Mac, I can't tell you, but it's some special hidden folder where MuseScore saves things like autosave files. Autosave files, if you've ever saved your score, the autosave file is very nicely right in the same folder that you saved it to. So it's really easy to find. But if you've never saved your score, MuseScore doesn't know where to put the autosave. So it's going to put it in this special folder. As you can see, it's also where it saves things like any custom shortcuts, any custom workspaces. It saves custom things here. So I think it's that one that says new project, but let's find out. I'm going to use ls-l. It puts a date on it. New project, March 15th. Look at that is the one. That is the score I want to open. So I'm going to open that score, and I'm going to do it by copying it to somewhere more reasonable right now. So MuseScore for new project, and I'm going to copy this thing to where I should have put it to begin with. Documents, MuseScore for scores, and Mastering MuseScore, and I'll just put it under Community. There we go. So now I can open that score. So probably there are some questions here. Is this after 4:02? So if you mean the crash, yes. So the thing is, this crash was reported like a month ago, but only a small handful of people's systems can reproduce it. Basically, I was able to reproduce it. One other person was able, the person who reported it originally was able to reproduce it. And one of the people who works for MuseScore but is not a developer was able to reproduce it. But so far, none of the developers can reproduce it. It's a crash that only happens on some systems. So it's one of those. So most likely, most of you won't ever see that particular crash. Anyhow, that was something about getting that autosave file back, and there it is. Look at that, new project. Do I want to call it new project? No, I'll call it something more smarter later. But at least now I've got my score. Open it, and hopefully I'll have that score back. Well, that wasn't so useful after all. It didn't save any of that more recent work. So that was a little bit of a bust there. Well, that's kind of unfortunate. I wonder if there was another version. Let me just see if under that session folder. This is where there's crash logs and things now. Oh well. So what I'm going to have to do is really quickly redo that. All right? You ready for this? 5. And then I want the accent mark, so I'll type Shift V, and I'm going to enter my notes. B, C, C, and this time I'm just going to hit C and then up arrow, which is the other way to do accents. 0, D, 0, D sharp, 0, E, 0, G, down, up, 0, A, and then an accent mark here. I mean, not an accent mark, but a dynamic marking here. F. And now I'm going to save this thing because I learned my lesson. All right. And I got to redo my tempo marking. 112. There we go. So, you know, that didn't cost me too dearly, right? It only took, I got to show you how to maybe find autosave files for scores you've never saved. And In this case, it wasn't very useful, but in a lot of cases it is. And I got all my music re-entered in just a few moments because, I hadn't gone too far. So now what I want to do is do that thing again with the explode. I will select across all of that and then say Tools, Explode. And now, while I'm at it, I'm also going to just take all this stuff and drop it down an octave because that'll help that repitch mode go a little smoother if I start off in a more reasonable octave. So I start on that first note. I will click that little arrow next to the, it's sort of a long click of this little arrow next to the note input icon, repitch mode. And now I can just type the notes, E, and Control down to drop an octave. Now I can just type the notes. I don't have to worry about the rest. I don't have to worry if there's any different rhythms. I just type the notes. E, 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 D, F, A, and then D, down an octave, and then E. So, that's that. I just did that staff. I'll now move down to the staff below and do the same thing here. Okay, so now here's a little trick. So, viola, alto, clef. Right? When I compose this, I'm going to tell you right now. Let me get back to the chat for a second and see. Yes, you can set the autosave interval. The default is every 3 minutes. Let me just get out of here and save again. If I go to Edit, Preferences, General, look at that, I turned off autosave. Well, that's why it didn't save anything. I was testing something at some point and turned off autosave, and it's still off. That's why it didn't save anything more useful. Oh well, now I know. It's back on. Okay, well, I'm glad I just checked that. But you saw there was a setting there, 3 minutes. So let me check back in the chat. Can you highlight each part and enter a pitch? So yeah, I mean, there's lots of ways of doing this thing that I'm doing here of like adjusting the pitches. Frankly, I might just use the arrow keys because, okay, so here, this is what I might actually do for the viola part. If you can't read alto clef and you can't be bothered, just select these things and I'm going to use the shortcut diatonic transposition to just move those notes down until they're on the right staff line. I don't have to know what pitches they are. Right? I can just move the notes down without knowing what the heck these notes even are. I could do that. I'm not saying that's a great idea. I don't necessarily recommend this in general, but it is an approach. So I'm just using the arrow, and so I'm using Shift Alt plus the arrow keys to change pitch diatonically. So that's sort of a cheating way of doing this. But another way, because it's repitch mode that I'm in, I think if I just click the new pitch, I think that also works. So let's find out. No, it still wants to build a chord. So repitch mode apparently is not a great choice. You can't, I guess clicking in repitch mode doesn't do what you might want it to do. How about shift click though? Shift click. Shift click, absolutely. Shift click. Come on. Yeah, it's just a little tricky. I'm not zoomed in enough. I'm not good at clicking notes. Come on. Move cursor back. There we go. So I got the thing in. Yeah, you can shift click notes in. That's another way of doing it if you don't read that clef very well. Now, frankly, I'm not often copying music in alto clef. I'm, in fact, almost never just taking an existing string quartet score and entering it into MuseScore. So this particular problem I'm trying to solve here of entering notes in alto clef without being able to read it well is not one I have to solve often. What I do, so I would love to read alto clef better. And I'm gonna check the chat in a minute here, but I want to talk about something that I do. So first of all, if I'm composing my own music, I don't use the alto clef. I will change this to a treble clef. Like if I select that clef and go to the palettes and then change it to this guy here, treble clef with an 8 below it. Now the notes fit on the staff and I can tell what they are. That first note is an E. If I didn't know it before, I now know it's It is the E below middle C. That is what this clef means. So alto clef is very similar in range to this clef here, the treble clef with the 8 below it. So if I'm composing music myself, I just write for that clef on the viola and then change the clef when I'm done. But if you're copying a score, you need other strategies. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about like how I try to teach myself alto clef as I go. But let me see if there's any other nice things here. And yeah, when you enter the pitch, so viola doesn't actually transpose, right? It's just a clef. But transposing, yeah, MuseScore does transpose for it if you're using actual transposing instruments. If you enter a C for a trumpet, it's going to play it as a B flat. And then there's the concert pitch button down on the bottom of the screen that you can use to control whether it's going to show you the C or the B flat. So transposition is a whole kind of subject in itself. So I do wish that I read viola alto clef better. And this is one of the things, frankly, in my basic music theory course. I mean, the first set of lessons, one of them includes a lesson on C clef. And I give you some advice for it. And frankly, I need to take my own advice and just do the work to get better at this clef. And the work for me consists of knowing where C and G are. This is how I like to do things. But what I will also say, I always refer to C because this is a C clef. And so it's telling you middle C is on that middle line. And then if I know where the C above that is and the C below that is, and I know where G is, somewhere, it's like a midpoint, I can kind of guess my other pitches from there. That's a useful way of learning to read any clef, really. But often, what I will do is ask myself, well, what key is the piece in, and know where the 1 and 5 in that piece are. This piece is in A minor, so I want to know where my A's are and my E's. So I'm going to work that out. If this is middle C here, this line here, the second line up, is an A. So these guys are all A's. And then A is going to be this guy right on the staff, and E is going to be, the second line is going to be A, and the space below is going to be E. Well, armed with that knowledge, I can start to read this thing a little bit better. A, and this is up a third, so C, that's down a step, so it's B, and then that's a C, I can tell because it's right on that line. Now the entry is down E, right? I know that's an E because I just memorized that fact, that note, the note sitting right below the staff is an E, and if that's E, that's D sharp, E, F, G sharp, A. Now I'm just reading the steps, right? I'm following the stepwise motion of things. A, G natural, A, G, F, A, G, and then that's up a third, so it's B, A, G. I can actually temporarily read alto clef. I'm going to forget this. I'm going to totally have to reteach myself that is an E, the next time I'm doing this. But for the duration of entering this music, that's actually quite useful. So you can find the start note for a phrase and then just sort of read it by following the patterns of steps and leaps and knowing where a couple of signposts are. So I talked in my lesson about it being C and G to use, but in reality, I often use the key of the piece to give me a couple of pitches to deal with. So when I enter an E for viola, it prints as a D. No, it's just that the clef is, this really is an E. That is what this clef is. That's just what this clef does. This isn't a transposition. This is really an E. Yes, it looks like a D if we thought this was treble clef. It looks like an F if we thought it was bass clef, but it's also clef, so that really is an E. If I type E right now, oh, by the way, repitch mode, you have to remember to leave repitch mode and go back to default step time mode. Anytime you use repitch mode, it's going to remember that fact. And that's sometimes convenient and sometimes not convenient, and I've been tripped by it more often than I care to admit. So if you find yourself, you're trying to enter notes, and you're like, why can't I enter notes? It could be that you are in repitch mode if you had recently been using that. So let's go ahead. I've got the violin 2-part in here, but I feel like I've made a mistake. Because as soon as I'm looking at this, I see some mistakes. I see this F here is supposed to line up with a G. Yeah, I don't have enough G's here. So let's talk about fixing that mistake. What happened is I was entering that viola part, got wrapped up in talking about these different clicking things, and I ended up with not enough G's. There's not a G's. I'm calling them G's. That is not a G. That is an A. There's supposed to be 4 A's. I've only got 3 here. But my pitches after that, are they good? Okay, so it looks like the rest of the pitches are good. It looks like this note is just supposed to be down a little bit. So I'm just going to move them down with the arrow keys. And then there's this guy. And then there's this guy. Okay, I messed up. And then I think I just hadn't finished yet. So I'm just using the arrow key method because what the heck, it works. So let's finish with the repitching by going to the viola, the cello, and again I will switch to repitch mode and see if I can remember to, so Control-Shift-I is the shortcut to get into repitch mode, but there's not a shortcut to return to step time mode, which is kind of a drag. So G, down an octave, up a step, and then A, hello, A. There we go. And then G. But I want the accidental on the G, so I'm going to type a natural and then the G, and hopefully I get my accidental. Good. And then F, F, E, E, and then I'm pretty sure it's an A, but it's an 8th note A. So I'll just go ahead and type the A, but now I'll change it to an 8th note with 4. So that process there that I just went through of using explode to copy the thing down to the other parts and then just repitching those, again, really didn't save me any time in this example because these were all quarter notes. This was really easy to enter. But imagine if that rhythm was more complicated. If that rhythm had been more complicated than this, like a mixture of quarter notes and 8th notes and 16th notes, and you're constantly having to change durations and add ties and things like that, and re-entering all of those durations for each part, that would be kind of a drag. Repitch mode really does kind of bail you out. And now I'm going to remember to leave repitch mode by going back to step time mode. And then hit escape to get back to normal mode. So let me take a look now at the chat. All right, make sure I haven't missed anything else. So I think, Mark, I've, I think I've hopefully addressed that about as well as I can. But the whole issue of how viola works and with the alto clef, it's just a pain that clef exists, but such is life. Vesa is using Linux, which is great to know. Here we go then. So the next thing that I want to do here, I spent a lot of time on these few measures because let's really review what you've learned. You learned about using explode to copy that same thing. I could have copied that first line and then paste again and then paste again. But explode will copy it to as many staves as you have selected. So you could have, if you have a 2D section in an orchestra, right, where the entire orchestra has the same rhythm, just write it once for the flutes, select it all, explode, and now you'll have those notes copied down to all the staves, and then you just got to repitch them. It's really a useful technique for ensemble writing because that sort of thing happens often. So what I want to do next is I'm getting tired of having to scroll around. I am going to make this thing a little wider so I can see this at a reasonable size and see a whole bit at a time. And I know from experience that if I shrink this down, some of that extra clutter goes away. So I want to talk about entering this melody here, but I do need to get the grace notes first, right? So let's make sure we get the grace notes. I'll come back to the violin 1 part, and the shortcut for a grace note is the slash key. Let me make sure I've saved. All right, slash key enters grace note, and when it enters that note, it enters it at the same pitch as the note you attach it to. So, I'm a big fan of just arrowing it down because it's fast and easy. And then, same thing here. Slash, arrow down. Yeah, you could get fancier about how you're doing this, but, Oops, I didn't do the slash. Slash, so I did the Control Z to undo. Move the sucker down. And slash, arrow down, slash. Here, I can go down a whole octave, right? So Control down. That made that much easier. You know, you can definitely be more clever than I am here. But arrow keys are super useful. You know, they're super useful. The last one is also an octave, so I will slash and then Control down. Now, each of those grace notes is supposed to have a slur on it. So, I'm just going to click S. Click S. This seems to be, for my money, maybe the fastest way of doing this. There's probably a clever way of using, like if I hit the arrow key right now, you can see the slur is selected. And if I hit the right arrow, it's just going to start moving the endpoint of that slur, which is not what I want. So navigation that way doesn't work. What if I select the measure and press S? What's going to happen? Nothing, because it's got like a rest in it and all. So if you need to do this by keyboard alone, I would hit now Alt right, and then that will move me. So yeah, Alt, but it skips the grace note. So it's a little weird that it skipped the grace note. Does that really always happen? Huh. Alt left and Alt right skip grace notes. That's a bug as far as I'm concerned. Anyhow, click grace note, press S. Click grace note, press S. Click grace note, press S. Now, when I'm copying scores, I will often add breaks, system breaks, to mimic the layout of the original. So there was supposed to be a break after that G sharp here. So let me select that measure and hit Enter. And that's that now. So, yeah, the little dot next to is this little arrow here is how you do this. But you have to kind of long tap it a little bit on MuseScore 4. It's designed so that you can actually just click the main bar and long click it. If you hold the thing down, just hold it down for like more than half a second, it'll pop up the little menu there. So yeah, so let's just, you know, I wanted to really focus on that 2T section because that's the thing that makes writing, 2T meaning everyone playing together, not 2D like 2D Fruity. Well, maybe that's what it comes from. I don't know, but T-U-T-T-I, everyone together, basically. Because that is the most, I don't know, typical of writing for ensembles, that you're going to have these 2T sections and therefore have to do this kind of thing quite often. So I wanted to make sure I covered that. But let's do a couple other things. So rehearsal marks. I select this rest here and Control M, and then I type my letter A. Now let's go ahead and start entering some notes here. For the melody, it's an eighth note, E, and then 16ths, D sharp. I typed plus D. I'm trying to get in the habit of using the plus for sharp, minus for flat, because it's new, it's cool, but I still often go back to the old method of entering notes and hitting an arrow key, which works also. So I'll do that next time. Here's an E for F, and now I'll type G and then the up arrow to make it G sharp. So either way works. Enter the note, then up arrow, or pre-select the accidental, then enter the note. They both work. 5 for the A. Now, here's where up arrow does not work. If I want to get that G natural in here, this is a courtesy accidental, right? This G, it's already G. If I enter for G, that already is a G. If I hit up arrow, it's G sharp. Hit down arrow, it's just back to G. I'm not going to get that natural sign by adding things after the fact like that. This is a case where I would have been better off if I undo all that stuff. Just type equals and then G, equals being the shortcut for naturals. So the new method that now exists where you can pre-select, you can use these shortcuts to pre-select your accidentals, it's really quite efficient, especially for situations where these are courtesy accidentals. And now 3, A, G, and then 5, F, A, 4, G, 3, B, A, 4, G, F, and of course I know it goes ba-dum, so 4, E, G. So I've entered that far. I'm going to save, and I'm going to take a quick look at the chat. And the thing I want to observe next, and really it's the main final point that I really want to make here, is how to use copy and paste. So we already saw using explode when everyone's got the same rhythm at the same time. What's about to happen here is this piece, as you may know, is contrapuntal in nature, meaning everyone comes in with essentially the same music, but offset. Like here, da 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 dum, and then the second violin comes bum 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 ba da 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 dum, comes in with the exact same phrase, but transposed down a little bit, starting a measure later. So let's do this. You have to know, of course, that that's going on, but I do. So I'm going to select that passage, Control C, and now go to the next measure here, and Control V. So this is now the same exact passage at the same pitch level, starting at E. But the real thing starts at A. Well, I want to get it to start at basically a fifth lower. Is it exactly the same? To be honest, I don't remember, but I'm about to find out. I'm going to transpose that sucker. I'm going to say Tools, because if I use the arrow keys, it's going to respell my accidentals for me, and I don't want that. See, I've got this mixture of sharps and flats and natural signs, so I want to actually tell it to transpose by interval down a fifth. If you didn't see that, that was Tools, Transpose. So now it's going to transpose it down a perfect fifth. There it is, and now I can look at it and see, does it all look right? It's almost all right. A, G sharp, A, B flat, C sharp, D, C natural, D, C, B. This should be a B instead of a B flat because not because MuseScore messed up the transposition, but because my own imitation wasn't chromatically exact. It had that little adjustment there. And then the same here. Select this note and change that. But other than that, there you go. That's done. Yes. The viola then comes in with the same thing in the measure before that. So I've actually already gone a whole system here. This is the end of that system, this measure. So I'll hit enter. And the viola comes in with that same thing right here. And it's an octave lower. It starts with an E, but it's the E an octave lower. Well, it's still there in my clipboard, right? So I should just be able to paste it, and then Control down to drop it an octave. And now again, I'll do a quick sanity check and see, did I get it? Did I get it? Did I get it? Did I get it? Yes. Excellent. It's all good. So I'm missing dynamics. So I'm going to select the first note of this phrase, the first note of that phrase, Control clicking it. Come on. Click. Hello. Okay. Not sure what happened there. I'm going to Control click each of these three notes and go over to the Dynamics palette and add my mezzo piano. Save. So this idea of how I'm using copy and paste to save work, yes, for just a few notes here and there, maybe doesn't really, save you any work over entering, just retyping the whole passage if it's a short enough, simple enough passage. But yeah, in the long run, you'll find those sorts of techniques to be really useful, really helpful when working with ensemble music. So that's the time we have today, but I absolutely encourage you to go ahead and work on this project. It's there in the community, in the notation projects section there. So if you look in the left sidebar here, notation projects, you'll see the string quartet score is pinned to the top. So just go ahead and download the thing or just look at it online and try your own hand at entering it into MuseScore. See what questions come up and, post them in the community and we'll talk about it. That's what we're here for. So tomorrow, Music Masterclass, we'll be digging deep into some of the topics from basic music theory. People have started posting their first projects here where we're writing a melody using a certain set of pitches and a certain set of kind of constraints that was popular in the Middle Ages. So the idea being to kind of give us an idea of of what are the things that are involved in writing music from a limited palette, and then how we're going to start adding to our palette. So I'm really looking forward to sharing some music with you tomorrow, music that people have composed based on the prompts that I've given. And I will also say, I said in my newsletter that I was closing enrollment for Basic Music Theory yesterday, and all right, so maybe I lied a little bit. I'm going to keep it open until tomorrow, because if people watch the masterclass tomorrow and go, oh, now I see what it's about, I want in, I don't want to say no. So I will close it at the end of the day tomorrow. So if you still want to join the Basic Music Theory course, by all means, please go ahead and do so. So I hope you've enjoyed this session. Let me just take a quick catch up of the chat and see if I've missed anything else here. So yeah, I'm glad to have discovered a couple of things here while I was doing this, and hopefully you've all found something to learn from, something useful here. Hope you all had a good time, and see you all next time. Goodbye. Goodbye as soon as I find my window. I'm not really here. I'm just trying to find the window with, there it is. There we go. Bye.